Just let us know when to begin so I can start. Such an event. We're looking forward to fruitful discussion and constructive dialogue. No? My co-host is Christian, and you could already know him as the host of the Volt Rotterdam Congresses and Volt Rotterdam podcast. And I am Christine, and I am part of the Volt Rotterdam Europe team. I would like to introduce you firstly to Damian Boeselager. In 2017, Damian co-founded Volt as an answer to the growing nationalistic tendencies noticed all across Europe. In 2019, Damian is elected as member of the European Parliament, joining the Greens EFA party in Brussels. Originally from Frankfurt, Damian spends his time between Brussels and Berlin and all over Europe to gather input and talk to the thousands of Europeans that supported the Volt campaign. As a parliamentarian, his goal is to create the foundation for a stronger and more united European Union. By being part of different European parliamentary committees, Damian aims at building a more transparent, more integrated, and more transnational European Union.
The second guest of this evening is our very own Imane from Rotterdam. Imane Elfilali is leading the list of 12 candidates for the local elections of Volt Rotterdam. She is a mom of two and lives in the southern part of Rotterdam at the beautiful place Katendrecht. Imane's priority is green, clean, and modern Rotterdam with equal opportunities for all. She got into politics because she wants to contribute to more trust and transparency and build on a municipality that really works for all the people of Rotterdam. She feels also strongly that we need more women in politics. Imane is specialized in international and European law and has 14 years strategic and political experience as an EU legal advisor, negotiator and diplomat. Currently, Imane works as a team leader of two teams with the Dutch Ministry of Health, dealing with pandemic preparedness, innovation, and the security of supply chain for the medical products. Before that, Imane was based in Brussels, where she was responsible for competitive policy, the single market, and digital platforms. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Damian and Imane, for being here. I'm firstly going to turn to you, Damian, and we're going to talk a little bit more about your story with Volt. So as a co-founder of Volt, could you tell us how you decided to found this party?
I mean, that's obviously takes some time, but I will try to explain a bit how it all went. But first of all, hello, everyone, and thanks a lot for the invitation to speak to you today or this evening. I'm very honored and very happy, especially to be with you, Imane, here on the podium, if you can say that, on the stage together. And I do have a question of what your children are called, but we can discuss that later if you want. So how did I decide to found Volt? I think the first answer is I didn't decide. But I mean, basically, I started studying in my master's program together with Andrea Venzon, an Italian guy, and we talked a lot. It was 2016, so obviously quite an interesting time because we were studying in the US, and at that time in the US, who knows it? I don't know if you know, but there was an interesting election campaign running between Hillary Clinton and Trump, the first time Trump ran. And I had, let's say, little to do with politics. I mean, I was more interested in, following my private sector career, going out drinking with friends and partying and, being happy. And I think already the Brexit referendum that happened earlier that year, so July 2016, was a bit of a shock to that because my understanding of that history, would just somehow always progress and there would be more cooperation and, politics would somehow be annoying, but like go in the right direction was a bit, let's say, I don't know, maybe shaken is the right word, shaken by that. And then in the election night in 2016 of basically Hillary Clinton's and Trump's election night, I was in Hillary Clinton's campaign center, which was cool because there were like 30,000 people, and there was Katy Perry on the stage, and she was like singing. Then there was the Bishop of New York who said like, "Oh, bless our first female president," and so on. And everybody was very excited and happy and sure that Hillary Clinton would win. And then obviously the results came in one by one, and we realized that this was not so much the case. And so people started sitting down and started crying. And then there was like obviously kind of an intense moment for me, because imagine you have 30,000 people crying around you, which is a bit of a shock. So and then after that, Andrea said he's going to found an Italian party, and I should and asked if I can help him. I can read a bit of Italian, and so I read over his program and so on. And then he said like you should do the same in Germany. And to Colombe, a friend, he said the same. She should do the same in France. And then, I mean, the idea developed to do something and to do something together, and that would be a European party to really do something new. I mean, that's the history of it. I think if you think about why, and that's for me a very simple question. If you lose this belief that history is just naturally progressing towards something better, and that countries will cooperate more and more, you understand that it's more of a struggle and a fight for what you believe in, and that there's a very valid, let's say, crossroads that Europe is currently standing at and is still standing at, which is, do we go for a model of basically parliamentary cooperation, and I'll explain what I mean in a second, or do we go in this model of a national interest represented by heads of state and government? Yeah? And both, to be honest, are theoretically valid. Yeah? So, I mean, if you discuss the second point, it's more like this medieval idea of having heads of state and government come together, and they sit there angrily staring at each other and say, let's barter out a deal. And then you have someone like a secretariat, and you can call it the commission or whatever, who just writes down notes, and that this is, what you decide together. And it's like every day a new treaty, if you want, of what you agree on. And the other model is the one that we know from the national level, where you don't, cut by regions or by national interests, if you want, but you cut by, are you a conservative? Are you a social democrat? Are you a liberal? Are you, I don't know, whatever you are on the scale? Are you green? Whatever it is, the left. And then these political ideologies fight against each other in a way for their interests, and then something comes out, and that's a law or something in the process. And okay, and with this I stop, but I think for me, I realized that if you look at Europe and the foreign policy issues like Ukraine, if you want to call it like that, could also call it the security issue. If you look at migration, if you look at climate change, if you look at digitalization and startups that want to grow across the continent, so all of these issues, they cannot be solved with this intergovernmental model, which is a medieval kind of way. And even worse, they can't be solved. But it could also happen that if we go to this intergovernmental model, that in the end we will have nations fighting each other again. Because basically, if it's always the German chancellor versus the Greek chancellor or prime minister or whatever, and all of them always fighting, then national prides are added to the interest battles. They're not content-based, but regional, nationally based, and they're not representing the full variety of opinions that are actually happening within a single country, and they limit it to I am German, I am French, I am whatever. And so for me, that's really like where the theoretical thought, and then maybe a last point of why, and then I stop, I promise, why I did this is because when Andrea asked me to join, I realized that there's nothing that seems so foreign to me as going into a political party. And I was wondering why that is the case. Why do we think it's so weird to be part of politics or part of a political party? And I thought maybe we can also just use this to push people to become more political again, and to just think about politics not as a separate world that's somehow far away, but like as our own thing, like if you live in a flat and you have a flat share meeting maybe from time to time, where you discuss who brings down the trash, And the same is true with politics. It's just like our flag share government, if you want, for the fact that we all live together, need to solve our common social and environmental and whatever issues together. And it's so weird that we feel so detached and that we read about it in the news, but don't understand that it's basically our system. Okay, so with this blah blah, sorry for like the long introduction. I mean, that was the reason, and then we started posting on Facebook, and somehow people found it so interesting that they joined. And now look where we are.
Thank you so much for your answer. And indeed, like you say, look at where we are. As we can notice, Volt is a significantly growing party in Europe. For instance, we can already notice it in Rotterdam more locally, and throughout Europe, with parties growing in almost every country throughout the European Union. So I'm asking myself, and I'm asking you, what do you see as the future of Volt? As it grew from, in a few years, it grew immensely. What do you see for its future? What are your visions?
I mean, you have to think about how crazy this is. Just like as a general remark, you know, like for me, when I was, for example, in the Bundestag elections, also traveling into like these small villages in somewhere in Germany, but also in Portugal, and I see Volt flags and I think, okay, that's so weird, you know. We have all these people that somehow think that this is a good idea. And that's the funny, or like, let's say, flashy side for me. But then I think about the task, and that's my vision also for the future. And I understand that we are not strong enough yet. Yeah? And that's a very simple conclusion from the fact that we haven't managed to deliver on our biggest goal, which is tipping the scale towards collaboration away from confrontation and national interests only. And so, I mean, my theory of change for Volt is always extremely simple. Become such a relevant force in all European countries, all 27 European countries, that all parties in all 27 European countries have no other choice but to develop a vision for Europe. And then we actually force, you know, a revision of the European treaties towards an actual European democracy that we so desperately need. So that's the first point. And the second point is definitely solve all the issues that we care about on all levels, yeah? Local level, regional level, national level, and European level. Because, I mean, the reason why we want to improve the European system is because we want to improve the world that we live in. And so obviously we can't just wait for one to have the second happen. So I think it's very important that we fight for an inclusive, transparent, open, friendly, positive, and pragmatic way of doing politics on all levels to improve the world around us. And maybe as a last point, I hope that we will never circle only around ourselves, but that we always measure our impact by what we change in the world, because that's the only relevant, you know, measure. The measure is not how happy we are, or like if we like our cards together, or I mean, these are all good. Don't understand me wrong, but I think the most important, you know, measure for us is: can we actually change something in the way politics is done? Can we change something in the world out there that actually means something for citizens? Yeah.
Thank you, Damian. Great story. Hearing it from you, and going now to Imane. We've heard Damian now for a while, but we also want to hear your story. Can you please tell us about your journey of becoming the leader of the list for the upcoming municipality elections here in Rotterdam?
Yes, happy to do so. And first of all, hi everybody. Hi Damian, it's a pleasure to be with you in this conversation tonight. And thanks to Christine and Christian for hosting us. Yeah, my story with Volt. I think it started when I was working in Brussels around the last European Parliament elections. It was when I first heard about Volt. And I didn't know a lot about it. It was an interesting movement, energetic people, but I mean, I didn't know really the details about Volt. And it took some time. It was until I moved to the Netherlands in 2020 when I started to think more about Volt. I mean, Volt was also more prominent in the news in the Netherlands, and I started reading about Volt and got to know about it more. And then there was this moment I thought, actually, this is exactly the way that I think. It fits the way I feel about the European Union, which is something that is very important in my life. It started with my studies, maybe even before that, when I was in high school. But the thought of the European Union it's something that is very important to me. There was a moment just before our national elections in the Netherlands last year when it really got to me, and I thought, okay. Volt is the party where I really feel at home in some way. But I also thought I really want to contribute to this movement. I want to help, and I want to do that in every way that I can. And bringing a lot of EU knowledge is something very concrete, but what I really liked about Volt is also the people that I met in Rotterdam. Positive-minded, constructive, clever, but also really open to change the world. And people who know me know that when I start doing something, I go for the 100%. For me, it's like all or nothing. So when I became a member of Volt, I thought, okay, I want to contribute. And what is the best way to contribute? That is to be to be politically involved. And you can do that in many ways. You can help us, like, all our volunteers in Rotterdam, but also in other Volt cities or Volt countries. You can make a difference by being a volunteer and by sharing your knowledge or your expertise or anyway. And then I thought, I've been working as a civil servant and as a diplomat for quite some years. So I know that, I got to know that if you really, really want to change something, if you really want to be the person who is, contributing to this transition in politics, or if we look at, policy areas like our climate, then you have to be politically involved. So that's how I got into Volt. And then, next morning you wake up and then you're heading the list of candidates for the municipality elections.
Thank you for your story, Imane. Very enlightening. Well, Damian just talked about how he helped in the founding of Volt and how he sees the future of Volt. What do you retain from Damian's story in your own campaign and getting those seats for Volt Rotterdam in the municipality?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's first of all, it's a very inspiring story, and it's all about making the change, and by just going for it, just do it. Just do it. It also reminds me of a quote of Winston Churchill, who was here in Rotterdam in 1946. It was my birthday, May 13. He visited Rotterdam after the Second World War. And one of the things that he said was to Rotterdam, the world is open to you. And it really makes me feel the same about Volt. And in my case, in Rotterdam, Rotterdam is really open to Volt. It's our momentum. It's the time. And I feel a lot of energy and it's very inspiring to hear Damian's story, and I think we can do the same in Rotterdam, but also in the other 9 municipalities where we're running for the elections. And I think that if you just believe in your dreams and in your ambitions, then we can make it happen. So that's maybe the way I'm trying to do this campaign. It's a lot of us are doing this for the first time. So that's also maybe it's an advantage, because you don't really know what is going next, and you just go with the flow. And we have an amazing group of people who are helping us every day in all kinds of ways within this campaign. And that is, it gives a lot of energy, and we just go for it.
Thank you so much, Imane, for this very insightful answer. And we really believe in Volt, and Volt Rotterdam can do it, thanks to you and everybody supporting you behind. I'm turning back to you, Damian. As you know, or for people who don't know, in the European Parliament, the parties are composed of many different national parties as well. So among all these other parties, what is the added value of Volt in the European Parliament, in your opinion?
So first of all, great to also hear your story, Imane. I think it makes me super happy that, this idea of if there's willpower or like initiative, it somehow will create other initiative. I think that's very cool, and it makes me happy that in your case, this was also the case. And for you, it's also already the case that you're inspiring others to become active. And I think that's what I tried to say earlier in more complex words, probably. But in the end, it's so cool if we all just understand that, that politics is not this other world, but that we can actually just be part of it if we want to, and that it even improves politics and democracy if we don't understand ourselves just as voters, but as active shapers of where our societies are going. So it makes me very happy. So you asked me, what the special impact of Volt is in the European Parliament. I don't know. I don't want to, sound kind of completely pretentious, because obviously, I am one person out of 705 in the European Parliament, and I try to just do my job the best way possible. And my job is implementing the campaign promises that we as Volt made in 2019 in several different countries with the same election promises or election manifesto, if you want. And so, I mean, the way that I see this is we had, and I think it still describes Volt quite well, three main categories or three main promises. One was to reform the EU. The second was to build a more just society. And the third one was to create a innovation-friendly but sustainable economy. And for me, these are still my guiding principles in all the work that I do. So, because I got elected on them, so I see them as the promise that I made. So I have to somehow follow that. So on EU reform, I am part of the Conference on the Future of Europe, which is basically this conference of bringing citizens together with decision makers, so national parliamentarians, national governments, European parliamentarians, the European Commission, and many more people, to discuss what the future of Europe looks like. And it's quite funny because the Conference on the Future of Europe, I mean, if I would have to call Volt by another name, I would call it the Party of the Future of Europe. So it's really like, our our thing in a way. It's still unclear where this conference will lead, but I've tried to, as part of this, like a working group called Democracy, I'm trying to improve it a bit in the direction so that our, maybe for some people, radical ideas of building a European democracy actually become a reality. And I also work on the Electoral Law Act, which is basically an actual legal file that defines how the European elections work. And here I'm trying to implement a second vote for European political parties. And so for me, this would be a huge improvement if we would get it through as for Volt's idea of a European democracy, because imagine you don't only vote for your national party with the first vote in the European elections, and next one in 2024, but you also vote for European parties, which then, I mean, at some point you get closer in this direction of having this, what I called earlier, either nationalists fighting against each other or actual political directions, social democratic, green, conservative directions fighting against each other. And this is what I want to get to. And I think to have a second vote would be super helpful. It's just to give an example. I mean, the problem is you have to stop me if I talk too much, but let me go on. So the second point, more just society. Here I specifically work on migration and asylum. So I chose out of a range, obviously, of topics that are in this chapter to work on that, because I worked on that before, and it's also a bit of the reason why I became politically active. I didn't mention this earlier, but before I met Andrea in Cologne and we started discussing, I was in the German migration office and in 2015. So I really saw what happens if you have a national, system that is completely failing because of lack of European cooperation in the end. So even the great German bureaucracy was at its end. And so I think that's also something to keep in mind. So I work on that, which I mean, very simply, I think the added value here of Volt is that the discussion is quite extremized. That's not a word, but like it's quite, polarized is the right word. So some people want a more closed system. Some people want a completely borderless system. Everybody can come in. And what I'm trying to add to it is, first you need a system, and then you can decide whether it's closed or open. And this can change also with governments changing on the European level. Yeah, I mean, you could say we want a little more open, we want a little more closed, all on the basis of our asylum laws, which are there. But for all of this, you first need to stop this human suffering that is constantly going on our borders. And for that, you need a system that is humane. And we are not there. And so once we have a system, then we could decide, I think we could be a bit more open in trying to understand how things work. But like at the moment, we just need to stop the suffering and these deaths. I mean, I was just in the committee for that, the Interior Committee, listening to horrible accounts of what's happening on the Polish borders right now and so on. So we can talk hours about this, but maybe a pragmatic but very human-centered approach is what Volt can add when it comes to the migration and asylum debate. Okay, I'll try to speed up. Let's say on the third one, which is sustainable but innovation-friendly economy, I did a range of stuff. Yeah, and one is I very much focused on digital and data policy in the Industrial Policy Committee. So I work on, I negotiated a file called the Data Governance Act, which is all about data sharing platforms and their neutrality. And now we'll negotiate something which is called the Data Act, which is the question of who can sell data of devices that they own. And I give you one mini example of what I'm talking about so that you can get a bit of an idea. So imagine you buy a laundry machine and it's connected to the internet. So it's so-called part of the Internet of Things, or it's a connected device. And then on your phone, you can somehow start the machine and make it and see how it's running while you're going shopping or working or whatever. That's cool because it's helpful for you because you have like better service or whatever. And the manufacturer of that machine could potentially also look at that data to see if like their device is running well that they sold. So there's a use case for both to have this data, and very often this is already the case. And now let's forget for 1 second that this could also be personal data, because then it becomes more complicated. But just stay with me for the example. Now what we want in Europe is that we share more of this data also outside these two players so that the data can be used. And the laundry machine is an interesting one because laundry machines have a very, somebody told me this, a very sensitive sensor below the drum. And it's so sensitive that when the laundry machine is not running, it can actually catch seismographic movements. So, which means that, like, if you actually have laundry machines all across the world, connected to the internet, there's super interesting research data and also early warning data for earthquakes. So, and which means that there's a value in sharing this data. But if it's unclear if the user at the end who bought the machine or the manufacturer can share the data and sell it, or even just give it for free to a research institute, then it won't be shared. And that's something that we're trying to solve a bit with the Data Act and many other things. Then, okay, there's so much stuff. Okay, last one, I promise. We also worked on we worked on the EU recovery money. So I negotiated the 672.5 billion euros package to counter the corona crisis and the economic effects of that. And so I think we, from a European perspective, and that I think was very much our idea, was we could push for more European interests and priorities in that. And I'm happy to tell you more about it another day. So back to you, Christian.
Thank you, Damian. We've heard you talk about many things that Volt can contribute at the European Parliament. But we're also now here for the local elections, and at the moment of this live stream, there is a discussion online in one of the media channels, WhatsApp and YouTube, about whether Volt might not be too European focused when looking at local policies. For example, we have parties like Volt Rotterdam here who only focus on the city of Rotterdam. they become the biggest almost every year. Imane, with your experience in the Brussels bubble, how do you see that the EU can have a positive impact at a local level without maybe scaring away the biggest Europe haters?
This question triggers so many thoughts in my head. So I have to think where to start. And maybe let's start with the idea of the European Union. That is us. The European Union is not Brussels. It's not far away. I mean, the EU is us. So it's me, it's you, it's our city, it's our countries, our regions. So we are the ones who are deciding what's happening in Brussels, within the European Union. Of course, we have the institutions. So we have the European Parliament, where all our national parliaments are more or less coming together. We have the European Commission, who's responsible for the legislation, or at least has the right for initiative, for proposing legislation. And then we have the Council, and the Council are our government leaders. It's the countries, the European countries. But in essence, the European Union, it's us. So I think this thought is very important when we think about about the EU. It's not something that is happening to us. Okay, sometimes it is happening to us. Something is decided far away, and then it just comes to us, and we have to deal with it. And that is something that I would like to turn around when we talk about local politics or municipalities. I would like to see, and that is something that I want to contribute to, is that we also decide on what is coming at the agenda. So it shouldn't be the way that that Brussels is, dictating what we do. We also want to react and to decide, and also be agenda setting when it comes to certain topics. Because, for example, if we take climate policy, of course, the bigger decisions are taking in Brussels at the EU level. But in the end, here in Rotterdam, we are the ones who have to isolate our houses. We are here the ones who have to switch to electric cooking or to other ways of energy. It's our harbor who has to make the transformation to more innovative and also clean ways of producing, etc. So we can also be the one who decide, and also who we can have influence. Maybe that's a better word. And that is something that I would like to to show also to people in Rotterdam in conversations that I have already. You can. I wouldn't like to say convince people, because I don't like that word. But when you have a conversation with a person, you can talk about stuff like this. And what I really also like about Damian, you mentioned the Conference of Europe. I mean, we are a grassroots political movement, and we also, we are pro-European. And of course, I'm very EU-minded. But we want to make the EU more democratic. And how can you do that? You can only do that if we at the local level, for example, contribute to that. So there's so many ways where we can have an influence and also have an impact, and also influence the way that the EU is working. I can also talk hours about this, so maybe just stop here. But
can I come in here, because I think that's this makes a lot of sense, Iman, that you talk about how we all basically are also European citizens. I mean, that sometimes I think you think again we are Dutch and we are from Rotterdam, and then there's the EU, and then I think it's also, again, we have all these magical barriers. We have the magical barriers between us and politics. We have a magical barrier between us and and the EU and so on. And so it's good to break that down and understand that this is really, affecting us. And the second thing I think where Volt really is completely unique is we can see obviously cross-border issues very easily. So we have no issue of like discussing issues that could affect people that, I don't know, maybe commute to Rotterdam if it should be the case or something like this. And second, we have the advantage of being able to take best practices, and I guess this is also something that you've been discussing a lot, best practices from our chapters who are already elsewhere in, active. So for example, in Frankfurt, I know very well our local minister for digitization, who is from Volt, and Eileen, and she's really cool. And I mean, you have direct access also to people in Bulgaria, in Portugal, and so on, who might be dealing with issues that Rotterdam is also dealing with. And to be able to draw from all this wealth, not only within one country, but from across the European Union, I think is super cool, and actually something that we are like trying to actively use more and more, because many cities across the European continent, probably even beyond, face similar issues, and so we should be able to exchange on these best practices in a way. I think that Volt can do that, obviously, because we are one party.
Yes, thank you so much. It is very interesting to hear both of your points of view, and it's very current and topical, obviously. And as I'm jumping off what you have been saying, I have a question for both of you. For instance, the Green Deal is a top priority for the EU at the moment, and especially also for your party, the Greens, EFA. So I am wondering, Imane and Damian, how do you think that the green initiatives proposed by the EU will impact a city like Rotterdam, for instance, with such an important and strategic port? I'm curious to see what you think about this.
I'm happy to start, but also Imane, if you want to go first. Okay.
No, please go ahead.
Thanks. So I had to cut very short, like the point that I wanted to make on the recovery money. Yeah, I think it's a perfect example. Because what happened? What was my role when negotiating the recovery fund? As you said, I sit with the Greens, EFA, in the European Parliament, and not because they're my party, but we had to choose between the Liberals and the Greens, and so we had a better negotiation with the Greens and got them and joined them because of a vote of all board members across Europe and so on. But so what I negotiated there was, how do we spend these 672.5 billion euros? And more precisely, how do we spend the 37% that each country needs to spend on the green transition or on fighting climate change, if you want. So if you calculate that, it's, I think, don't quote me, but it's around 250 billion euros if you look at 37% of 672. So 250 billion euros that need to be spent according to fight climate change, and that in each member state. And so what we did is we wrote down a very detailed guideline of what actually is green spending, because you can say you need to use it against climate change, but like we need to define that somewhere. And so what we did is we defined very detailed intervention fields of what can be done with this money. And one thing that we defined, for example, and Imane mentioned it earlier, is we said that, for example, if you renovate your house as a house owner, then you can get this green money if you reduce your primary energy consumption by 30%. So basically, you need to show that whatever kind of changes you do to your house in the energy systems of your house will reduce the primary energy consumption by 30%. So that sounds super abstract. This is written in an annex somewhere in a European regulation about European funds, and it goes through a lot of processes to actually be able to get to the European citizens in the end, and the citizens of Rotterdam. But it will, and once it will actually mean that there's a green designed, if you want, requirement in there, which I think is very helpful. So obviously this, as Imane earlier said, affects all of us citizens. And if we want to have a green transition that actually works, we will all need to work together in a way from all levels to achieve that goal. Another example is the question of local waste systems and circular economy in cities. If we want to get where we need to get, then we need to reconsider how cities function. We need to make it possible, socially acceptable, and really, on the local level, understand how we can be also innovators in a way. So I hope that once we get elected in all these cities in the Netherlands, we can then innovate the ways of how we can be not just following European regulations, if you want, but actually thinking ahead of what a perfect city, a smart, a sustainable city can actually look like, and then show these ways. And I think Amsterdam is obviously good for that. Rotterdam is amazing for that, and I think all these cities can really be I'm looking for another word than avant-garde, but like pioneers is I think the word that I'm looking for. And I think that's also maybe part of Volt's spirit, is just to say, like, so much is possible. Let's not talk about all the things that are not possible. Let's see positive vision and really try to push for it and be pragmatic about it, but really have this big vision of where we want to go. And that's why I want to see Imane elected.
Thank you. Yeah, and maybe just to add something on that, I think this is also exactly the way how we can cooperate and also strengthen each other and join forces. You from the European Parliament, we from the local level in the Netherlands, and and other municipalities and countries, because we can think from our vision and also from our long-term goals, and then see how we can make it, concrete. We also say, think European, act local. This is exactly something. It is this, and it's very interesting what you mentioned about waste and also about circular economy, because when I was in Brussels, I was dealing with the single market. So we have the free movement of the four freedoms: so free movement of people, goods, services, and capital. But we still don't have a single market for waste. So if you really want to lower waste, we also have to make it easier within Europe to get to this circularity and also to recycle our waste. And there are so many problems at borders where you can do this. And this is just, an example. And in our election program for Rotterdam, we have the ambition to become zero waste. So this is a topic that I would really like to maybe have a brainstorm about with you, or maybe some other Volt countries, to think about how can we maybe get to a single market for waste, where we can really achieve low waste at a bigger scale. And I think a lot of things from within Volt start from thinking, from our vision, our ambitions, our dreams, and then we think, okay, but how can we make it concrete? So I think it's the sky is the limit with things like this.
Thank you, Imane. To continue with one of the questions in the discussion chats, Damian, you talked about making Europe a better democracy. Also, we all know that Volt set to try to guide digitalization in a good way. How can we potentially use new technologies to improve the quality of our democracy?
So, look, what we're doing right now is obviously also a democratic exercise to an extent. Yeah, we are having a debate, even though I sit somewhere far away in Berlin right now, and you sit in Rotterdam, and maybe Imane, you're also in Rotterdam based right now. Yeah, exactly. So that's great, and that's exactly how it should be. But yeah, how do I best say this? I think there are a lot of ways of how to improve transparency, participation, and all these points. Especially on the local level. Yeah? If you think about it, when you talk about local issues or city-related issues, many people have an opinion. This is much more complicated sometimes when you talk about, regulation XYZ on the European level. For local politics especially, I think it's important to have ways of participation, of showing what you care about and what your opinion is. But I think we should always differentiate, and I find this a really key distinction, between participation and meaningful participation. So meaningful participation means you have the information, you have the time to think about it, and then you can voice your opinion. Because just to transfer, the responsibility that elected officials have, or mayors or whatever have, back to the citizens does not make sense. I think that they are maybe a bit more old school. I think what makes sense is to, inform people about a very important issue, take the time to explain it, give people the time to think about it, and then take whatever kind of meaningful participation comes up, or what participation is then meaningful, so whatever kind of ideas come up, to take that and then also act on it. Because what I often see is that people just, put some polls out there and call them participation. Then they listen. I mean, don't inform the people. Then they take it. They put it somewhere in a report and then they ignore it or do something completely different. To be honest, also a bit what Macron did with his grand listening tours across Europe, across France before the election. So I think there I'm a bit more skeptical. And then maybe also another point that is often raised when I'm asked this question is, what do you think about liquid democracy? Yeah? So basically the idea that every decision that is being taken, we just allow people to go on an app and do X, Y, Z. And here again, I think you can get it from my earlier intervention. I'm a bit skeptical unless it is meaningful in a way. And so in Estonia, for example, every citizen is on this app. It's a state app, and they regularly have petitions that are signed by more than 95% of citizens. And that's cool. I think then you have petitions, but you have to make sure that these petitions are, informative, that they make sense and so on, and don't just get a Brexit referendum where people make it a populist kind of campaign against the government to do that. And especially on the local level, I think that works extremely well, and we should do that much, much more.
Iman, do you have any reflection on the story Damian just told?
Yeah, I was thinking about the participation and also about digitalization, because of course there's a lot of concerns related to data and also privacy, which is of course understandable. And we also have the digital divide within Europe. So that's the difference between those who can profit from digitalization and others who are lacking behind. And we also have this in Rotterdam at the local level. But thinking about having a modern city and a modern municipality, digitalization can contribute to that. But you have to do it in a way that people are not worried. You have to take people's concerns seriously, especially in Rotterdam. Unfortunately, we had some incidents where with algorithms and also practices from the government, where it's understandable, but that people are worried, but also that there is a lack of trust in the government and also in the municipality, in other institutions like the police, etc. And I think one of the things that we would like to do, and we have to do this at all levels, is to take that seriously, but on the other hand, also show the opportunities of innovation and digitalization. It can make your life easier. And Damian, you mentioned Estonia. We always call it Estonia because it is, they are so much ahead when it comes to digitalization and making your life easier. Of course, you have to do it in a way that it protects your data and that you're aware of the risks, etc. But it can make your life easier when if you go to a municipality and you have one shop, one place, one counter where you can fix all your things. That is so much easier than when you have to, go around to this desk and then to the other desk, and then you have the computer says no experience. That is not helpful. And how wonderful would it be to also make participation and involvement of citizens easier, maybe also through innovation. And one of our proposals also in our election program is that we want our municipalities to make use of innovative ways to communicate, to give information, but also to explain to citizens how you can do certain things. And it would be very interesting if we can move ahead on that as well. So, also some thoughts on this topic. A
super quick reaction, man, because I recently talked to the guy who's the Prime Minister of Estonia for some time, and he told me that in 2005 is the first time they voted completely, had the chance to vote electronically. Yeah? And I think that's also
amazing.
2005. It's almost 20 years ago, and in Germany, anyways, it's just to give and then obviously I fully agree with your points on digital, or let's say digitizing administration. I think obviously we should be able to offer these services completely digital. I think, yeah, I'm still waiting for some countries to put out like the zero analog strategy, basically saying that whatever you want to do, you can do it digitally. And then obviously you should also be able to, for those who want to do it analog, but like just in general from the mindset, you know. And anyways, I can talk about this also.
Damian, Imane, we understood that you only have 6 minutes left before you need to go to other meetings. Though the community is very active with asking questions, and we really would like to ask you one final question, and more to Damian, but preferably keep it in like 3 minutes if possible. But the question is, what are your views on economic participation / emancipation, like a worker corporation, community funds, like democracy made real by enough financial independence of communities?
So I don't know all the examples I think that were mentioned. At least I haven't maybe fully understood what was said. But I think maybe to quickly talk about two aspects. I don't know if that's really going in the right direction. But the first one is, I think economic independence is a crucial part for my understanding of how society should work. Okay, let me explain this. If you read the Constitution of Liberty of Hayek, yeah, and Friedrich August von Hayek is supposed to be like, I think, one of the founders of the idea of capitalism, of the free markets, you know, like of really this old capitalistic idea. He says in his first chapter that he believes in unconditional basic income. Yeah? And I personally have calculated for Germany and it didn't really work. So let's not discuss that too much. But I'm happy to. So Volt's stance on this is that we should test and calculate and find out whether it works or not. But the idea that you should be independent before you go into any form of a labor contract makes a lot of sense, because then you actually have the power to negotiate what kind of salary you would like to take and so on. So I think the idea of that is very important. I think it would also allow you to take more long-term decisions regarding politics. So I do think that there's a case to be made on that side. And that brings me to a very important point for cities as well, and that's the question of social insecurity. Like, I know that housing is an issue in every city in Europe. Yeah? I mean, there's probably not one that is like of the bigger cities that say that doesn't have this issue. And for me, if you look at the available income, you can see that it's declining over the decades, and that people are not able to buy the flat, like a single flat or a single house, half house anymore in most of our cities. And I think that's really bad, because it destroys this kind of feeling of security, of being part of a society, of having a more long-term perspective where you can raise your children if you want to do that, or where you can live and, you know, host whatever your life looks like. So I think these are very fundamental, almost psychological and I don't know what the right word is, societal psychological issues that we should care about, and therefore I care a lot about this. Cooperatives and these kind of new models of capitalism, I think, are also very interesting to look at. From my perspective, but I think this first part of, you know, actually functioning, if you want capitalism, but society for everyone is what I care personally a lot about.
Now, thank you, Damian. That was indeed a very short but very insightful answer, and I'm sure it will lead to a lot of reflection and more thoughts for the future. I wanted to thank you once more, Damian and Imane, for being part of this conversation tonight. I am sure this conversation has been very fruitful and useful for the future of Volt, not only Rotterdam, but Volt Europe. And I thank you for your participation and your answers. And if you have any last words you want to share to the public and everybody else. Either Imane or Damian. I wish you all a very...
I just talked, so I thought maybe you go ahead, Imane.
Yeah, sure. Maybe just quickly. No, thanks a lot. It was very nice to have this conversation, and I just would like to thank all the Volters who are following this conversation. everybody who wants to help us during the campaign is very welcome to help us in any way you want. So let us know. And also, if there are other questions that we didn't answer tonight, feel free to email them. We can get back to them later on. And thanks a lot also for hosting this evening.
Perfect. Then from my side, I mean, again, for me, it's already just a huge success to see you all here, because I would have never guessed that this, when we started this with 3 little people somewhere in a study room, that this would happen. This was obviously our dream and our hope, but to see this all happening is only because individuals decide to do something and to become active, and you're part of these individuals, and that makes me extremely happy and thankful and humble. If you have any further questions, you're obviously able to you can reach out via social media and so on. I'm reading all of this, but I also have a question hour tomorrow at noon. I'm trying this format via Zoom, so if you want to ask any questions, you can also come and join us at Zoom tomorrow at noon for the lunch Q&A.
We will definitely forward that to the people from Volt Rotterdam. I'm sure they'll be interested. Thank you so much again for your time, and have a good evening. And we're looking forward to see the results of the elections.
Thank you.
Bye, man.
Thank
Goodbye.
you. All right. Bye-bye.